So as Dr. Wallace mentioned and as Dr. Vergara mentioned, I am the online student who went through this course and experienced the third head. So what I'm going to do,
You can use this to press down to advance.
perfect, thank you. So what I'm going to do is take you through my journey, and as, I'm sorry, I forgot, John Martin, thank you. As John Martin mentioned, and as Dr. Vergara also mentioned, we did this through the course of about 4 weeks, collecting data on ourselves, journaling, and then coming together, analyzing the data, and mapping out our growth. So I'm going to take you through my journey and go past the 4 weeks for a reason that I'll divulge a little bit later. Oh, am I having technical difficulties? There we go. So what is mindfulness into action? So really what this is as Dr. Vergara mentioned, this is a process in which we as individuals seek to go through the mindfulness techniques, go through the framework, and have that action piece associated with it. So for us, really, it wasn't just the process of mindfulness, the process of being aware of oneself, the process of kind of humiliation, as somebody mentioned earlier. It's the process of recognizing that there's an action associated with being mindful, and that was kind of what, through the course of the 15 weeks that we were in this course, attempted to identify within ourselves. So here we have the framework. We conducted hourly reflections. We went through a series of journals. And then we reflected as a group. So everyone went through this, but for me what was different was I was an online student. So while everyone had that face-to-face component, I did not. I did have one student in the course with me as well who was kind enough to FaceTime me into those sessions. But for me, that was my only real piece of connection with the other individuals of the class. Week to week, I experienced mindfulness into action in the MIA course virtually from my couch in DC for the most part. So as you can see there, I mapped out the framework up here for you guys to see. And if you take the course, which it is a really fabulous course, it's incredibly enlightening. This was really what we talked about. And the one thing that I took most importantly from the 5 Agreements, which is a book that we had read during the course, was the impeccable word. That for me was something that I felt like, for whatever reason, at week 0, when we had started this process, this for me was something that dinged in my head, and my initial thought was, this is what I'm going to take forward. And so I did my best to follow the 5 Agreements. For me, the impeccable word, week to week, during our reflections, and Dr. Vergara can attest to this, this was what I kept saying. I was like, my impeccable word is this. My goal for the week is this. This is what I want to accomplish. And as I kind of talk about my personality and talk about kind of my stage 0, this is really what I think I would like everyone to focus on, at least for my perspective. So week 0, we have our personality assessment. So we went through the global leadership profile, and we were asked to kind of take one of those Myers-Briggs organizational assessments that kind of tell you, oh, this is your stage 0, your neutrality. This is under stress, how you shift in perspective to this. And then this is what we wanted to achieve. So for me, talking about my personality a little bit, I'm incredibly organized. I mean, to a T. I map things out, I plan, I execute, all in accordance to my plan. I've been called a perfectionist, all of these things, but for me, I take those things with pride because that is how I maintain, kind of my self-identity. And Dr. Edmond talked about how can we be mindful if our mind is full. And my mind at week 0 and for as long as if I stop doing the mindfulness, which I don't plan to do, but that's a side note. So for as long as I was at that week 0 and kind of before I had done this practice, my mind was totally full of processes and developments and information that I had felt like this is my role, this is my, ROLE role, that I need to do to be who I am. It wasn't at my core who I am. It was what I had defined for myself to be who I am. So I do all of this to give you an idea of my snapshot. I was the achiever. I was the person who needed the process. I was the person who needed the goal. And one of the things Dr. Vergara didn't do in the beginning of the course was give us the goal. And when people asked that, she would say, you're just going to have to experience it for yourself. So you can only imagine for me what this did to me. I mean, it shook me. What do you mean I don't have a goal? What do you mean I don't know where this is going? How am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to know how to get an A? How am I supposed to, adhere to this? I don't know. And that for me was the toughest thing. I mean, incredibly tough. In times of stress, I moved to diplomatic. I shied away from confrontation. I didn't want to come in and, being a perfectionist, being, somebody who feels like they need the whole picture. I couldn't come in not knowing the entire picture. So for times of stress, I moved more to that diplomatic. So starting out in week 1, I had immediately started out in that diplomatic phase because I was doing something that wasn't my norm. It wasn't my homeostasis. So week 1, as I mentioned earlier, we went through journals, we captured hour by hour what we were feeling. Week 1, hands down, I was agitated. This was a new process. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where I was supposed to go with this. And I wrote my initial journal, and I kind of did what John Martin did, is I was like, okay, so I'm excited about this. I want to see where this journey is going to go. And, when I read through it at week 4, when we started analyzing our data, I mean, I could see it. Despite the words on the paper, I was agitated, I was frustrated, I'm mapping these emotions hour by hour over the course of a week, and I'm supposed to do it over the course of 15 weeks. What does this mean? What does this mean for me? I still don't have a clear goal, and I was just annoyed. Every time that bell went off, which I set a timer for myself, every time it went off, my body shook. I was like, oh my God, this bell again. This bell is going off again. So that was week 1. Week 2, I decided in week 2, I'm just going to give up and I'm going to experience this. And I don't know what prompted that shift. I couldn't tell you because that is so incredibly unlike me. To give up and to allow a process to take me over versus taking the process over myself and making it my own. I just had to experience it. I don't know how to describe in any other words that I had just given up. But really, week 2, the bell went off. I was still annoyed hour by hour, but I was letting myself experience things. And at this point, week 2, I still hadn't identified a change. But I knew that I was doing something that, as one of my colleagues said, wasn't business as usual. I still couldn't put my finger on it yet, but I knew that there was something coming. So week 3, I call this Let the Mindfulness Games Begin. At this point, I really have kind of resigned myself to the changes. I'm allowing the changes to emerge. I still don't know what they are. Deep down, they still freak me out a little bit, but I'm letting the process take me over. I'm letting myself experience it. And the agitation with the bell was at a minimal at this point. It would go off and it was just part of my routine. I mean, you have to think hour by hour. Over the course of 3 weeks, it just becomes part of your everyday. That bell is just something that just, it's like your 9 a.m. coffee, your 10 a.m. bell, it was just something that was ingrained in my routine at this point. And, week 4 was really when I started feeling what Dr. Vergara and others have described as this third head. And I called Dr. Vergara and I was like, I want to talk to you. I'm at week 4. I've analyzed my data. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. And so Dr. Vergara and I got on the phone. She's like, tell me how you feel. So I started telling her, I was like, I just feel really positive, which, week 0, total pessimist, I will own it. I was somebody who wasn't always seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I was always like, oh, why is this happening? Why is this happening? I was just feeling something positive. And I remember walking down the street in DC and just things were rolling off my back. I work in an incredibly stressful environment and it wasn't affecting me. One of the things I didn't mention is that week 0, despite needing the process, I'm a big feeler. I'm an emotional person. I'm a crybaby. And that is the only way that I can really express myself. And at week 4, I mean, not like I was crying every day, but I wasn't feeling that anymore, you know? So I'm talking to her on the phone, and it's like, I was so emotional. I was so overtaken by this. And one of the things I remember saying to her that I will never forget was, you know, when I started this process, I didn't know what mindfulness was. I didn't know if it was some sort of yogi technique. I didn't know if it was some sort of like religion I was learning. I just didn't know what this was. For me, mindfulness was getting to a state where I appreciated my everyday, getting to a state where what I did was what I did and I was myself and I wasn't letting other people's negativity impact me. So 4 weeks later, that's what it took me all of that time and all of those hourly reflections to realize. So I'm going to fast forward to week 6. One of the things about mindfulness into action is the action piece. It's not a process that you get to and then it's lifelong. It is a lifelong learning process, just like cultural humility, just like, you know, any other process. You have to commit to it. Week 6, I went away on vacation with my newlywed husband. I was so excited, forgot my phone. Now I have no hourly bell. I mean, I could literally feel the third head slipping away from me. And that was my reflection that week. And it was feeling like I had let myself down. And it's incredibly quick how those tendencies from week 0 come back to you. So I did want to highlight that because for me, I achieved the third head. I lost the third head. And it took me a week and a half, and Dr. Vergara and I mapped this out. It took me a week and a half to get back to a place where I was experiencing the third head again. So what lessons did I learn through this process? One of the biggest ones that I mentioned was this is not permanent. Mindfulness into action has an action piece associated with it. So it's not a technique that you can use it and lose it. Actually, I'm sorry. It is a technique where you can use it and lose it. What else did I learn? That I could break down my own mental barriers, that I wasn't tied to the processes that I myself had tied myself to because I felt like that was part of my role, because I felt like these are some of the things that I had to take with me. They were attributors to my success, whatever it is that I had mapped out for myself. I learned that I can do hard things, which is something that's written like on a Nike t-shirt. That I have at home, but it was something that I carried with me moving forward. I can do hard things. I can try new experiences. And I was one of the students sitting with Dr. Wallace, and she said, take this course. And I said, okay. I mean, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know anything about it, but she told me to take this course. She was my advisor. I was going to take the course. So I can't tell you how happy I am that I did, because I did feel that shift in consciousness occurring. And for me, it was just important to try something new and step away from my comfort zone. And coming in as a doctoral student, this is also, I just wrapped up my first semester. It was incredibly important for me to try new things because that was something that I missed out on through the course of my education so far. At the end of this, we took our global leadership assessment once more to map out a pre-assessment and a post-assessment and how we had grown. So if you can remember my first results, I was an achiever by nature. So kind of thinking back to needing the process. I had moved to redefining, which was, it's on a scale, and so I had shifted one down towards the direction that I'd wanted to go. So in the course of 4 weeks, I had made a move that another assessment, not just me feeling that I had made a move, it was validated through a tool, and for me, still needing a little bit of that process, not completely transitioning away from that, I needed that for myself. And then the interesting thing was my fallback in times of stress was that achiever. So what does that tell you kind of as academics? That I had transitioned, but not totally away from the place that I had come from. That's it. Thank you guys. I thought there was one more slide. Thank you, everyone.